Across much of Europe, debates over immigration, integration, and economic sustainability have moved from the margins of public discourse into the center of political life. Over the past 2 decades, European societies have experienced rising levels of immigration, increasingly complex demographic shifts, and growing pressures on social welfare systems. These developments have coincided with geopolitical challenges, energy policy transitions, and renewed security concerns. Together, they have placed Europe at a critical juncture, forcing its leaders and citizens to re-examine long-standing assumptions about openness, solidarity, and the role of the state. Immigration has long shaped the cultural and demographic landscape of Europe. In the post-war years, countries such as Germany, France, and the United Kingdom welcomed large numbers of workers to support their growing economies. These arrivals often came from former colonies or neighboring regions, contributing to the economic rebuilding of Europe while enriching its cultural fabric. In recent decades, however, migration has increasingly taken the form of asylum-seeking and irregular crossings, particularly from regions such as the Middle East, North Africa, and Sub-Saharan Africa. Wars, political instability, economic hardship, and climate stress have all contributed to these movements. While many migrants seek safety and opportunity, their arrival has posed complex challenges for European host nations. Public concern has often focused on questions of legality, integration, and social cohesion. Citizens in several countries have voiced frustration at what they perceive as inadequate border controls and limited enforcement of immigration rules. Critics argue that governments have failed to ensure that newcomers acquire language skills, adapt to local laws, and integrate into broader society. At the same time, supporters of immigration highlight Europe's aging population, declining birth rates, and labor shortages, all of which suggest a long-term need for migrants to sustain the workforce. They emphasize the contributions of immigrants in sectors such as healthcare, transportation, and technology. This tension, between the perceived costs and potential benefits of immigration, has become one of the defining debates of European politics. The question of integration lies at the heart of the immigration debate. While Europe is home to many success stories of migrant communities flourishing and contributing, there are also challenges that cannot be ignored. In some urban areas, clusters of residents remain socially and economically isolated, leading to perceptions of parallel societies. Language acquisition has proven particularly important for integration. Countries that have invested in robust language programs often see better outcomes in employment and education. Conversely, limited support for linguistic training can leave migrants trapped in cycles of dependency or marginalization. Cultural adaptation is equally complex. European societies have long championed principles such as gender equality, freedom of expression, and secular governance. Newcomers from regions with different traditions may struggle to reconcile these values with their own beliefs. Without structured civic education, misunderstandings and tensions can grow. Policymakers increasingly recognize that integration cannot be left to chance. Comprehensive programs that emphasize civic responsibility, legal literacy, and cultural awareness may help reduce friction. However, designing and implementing such programs requires both financial investment and political will, resources that are often scarce. Public attitudes toward immigration have shifted considerably in recent years. Whereas earlier debates often occurred in policy circles, immigration has now become a central concern for voters. Large-scale demonstrations, political campaigns, and grassroots activism reflect the intensity of the issue. In the United Kingdom, protests have arisen against policies viewed as too lenient on irregular migration. In Germany, debates over social welfare entitlements for newcomers remain particularly heated. Meanwhile, in Mediterranean countries such as Greece and Italy, the physical burden of receiving large numbers of arrivals has placed significant strain on local services. Political parties across the spectrum have responded to this shift. Some advocate for stricter border controls and reduced welfare access for non-citizens, while others argue for more generous humanitarian policies. The result has been an increasingly polarized political environment, with immigration often serving as a litmus test for broader questions of identity, sovereignty, and national security. Europe's immigration challenges are closely tied to its demographic realities. Many European nations face shrinking native populations, with birth rates well below replacement level. For example, in Germany, the fertility rate hovers around 1.5 children per woman, a figure insufficient to maintain population stability. At the same time, populations are aging, creating growing demand for healthcare, pensions, and social services. This demographic shift places significant strain on welfare states, which were originally designed under conditions of higher birth rates and younger populations. Immigration is often seen as a potential remedy, offering new workers to support the system. Yet this approach requires careful management to ensure that newcomers are able to contribute effectively. Without successful integration into the labor market, immigration can instead exacerbate fiscal pressures. Germany's current leadership has acknowledged the dilemma, warning that the welfare state in its present form is unsustainable without major reforms. Across the continent, similar concerns are emerging, as governments struggle to balance fiscal responsibility with social expectations. Beyond welfare pressures, Europe also faces challenges in maintaining its global economic competitiveness. Once at the forefront of technological innovation, Europe now finds itself losing ground to both the United States and Asia in sectors such as artificial intelligence, robotics, and biotechnology. One contributing factor is the migration of talent. Skilled workers, researchers, and entrepreneurs increasingly seek opportunities abroad, particularly in the United States, where a more dynamic labor market and greater access to venture capital offer attractive prospects. This brain drain further complicates Europe's ability to adapt to technological transformation. Policies aimed at attracting and retaining talent have been introduced in several countries, but results remain mixed. To remain competitive, Europe may need to reconsider its regulatory frameworks, taxation policies, and innovation ecosystems. Immigration policy, in this context, intersects with broader questions of economic strategy. Europe's commitment to climate goals has reshaped its energy landscape. Many countries have set ambitious targets for reducing carbon emissions, investing heavily in renewable sources such as wind and solar power. These efforts align with global commitments to environmental sustainability but have also generated unintended consequences. The rapid transition away from fossil fuels has sometimes left energy systems vulnerable to supply disruptions and price volatility. Natural gas, nuclear power, and coal plants have been scaled back in several nations, even as demand for electricity continues to rise. The result has been higher energy costs for households and industries, raising concerns about affordability and competitiveness. Meanwhile, other major economies such as China and India continue to expand their use of coal and other conventional energy sources. This discrepancy underscores the challenge of balancing environmental responsibility with economic practicality. Europe now faces the task of recalibrating its energy policies to ensure both sustainability and stability. Greater investment in energy storage, diversified supply chains, and cross-border cooperation may help mitigate risks. In addition to economic and demographic pressures, Europe confronts renewed security challenges. The Russian invasion of Ukraine has underscored the fragility of the post-Cold War order and forced NATO members to reconsider their defense commitments. For years, many European countries relied heavily on the United States for security, maintaining relatively low levels of defense spending. That era appears to be ending. In response to new threats, NATO members are pledging to meet or exceed spending targets, with some considering defense budgets as high as 5% of gross domestic product. This shift raises difficult questions about fiscal priorities. Higher defense spending may require reductions in other areas, such as social welfare or public infrastructure. Yet the urgency of security concerns leaves little room for delay. The challenge for Europe lies in achieving a sustainable balance, strengthening defense capabilities without undermining economic stability or social cohesion. The themes of immigration, welfare, economy, energy, and defense are deeply interconnected. Decisions in one domain inevitably shape outcomes in others. For example, immigration policy influences labor markets and demographic sustainability, which in turn affect fiscal capacity and economic competitiveness. Energy costs shape industrial productivity, which impacts defense spending and international influence. This interdependence means that Europe cannot address its challenges in isolation. Comprehensive, coordinated strategies will be necessary if the continent is to navigate the complexities of the 21st century. Looking ahead, Europe faces several options. 1. Enhanced integration policies. Investing in language training, civic education, and employment programs could improve migrant outcomes, reducing social tensions and increasing economic contributions. 2. Reformed welfare systems. Adjusting welfare provisions to reflect demographic realities may help ensure long-term sustainability while maintaining social solidarity. 3. Economic and innovation reforms. Encouraging entrepreneurship, streamlining regulations, and fostering research and development could strengthen Europe's competitiveness. 4. Balanced energy strategies. Combining renewable investments with reliable conventional sources may provide both sustainability and stability. 5. Strengthen defense cooperation. Greater coordination within NATO and the European Union could improve security while sharing costs more equitably. Each of these pathways carries trade-offs, but together they highlight the need for comprehensive reform. Europe stands at a crossroads. Immigration, integration, demographic pressures, economic competitiveness, energy policy, and defense challenges are converging in ways that will shape the continent's trajectory for decades to come. The decisions made in the coming years will determine whether Europe can adapt to changing circumstances or risk stagnation. Success will require not only policy innovation but also a renewed commitment to civic values and social cohesion. While the path forward is uncertain, one truth is clear: the interconnected challenges of the present demand solutions that are as complex and multifaceted as the issues themselves. Europe's future will depend on its ability to balance openness with responsibility, sustainability with practicality, and security with solidarity.